I burnt my ear slightly on my curling wand and it's so red. Just gonna cover that. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Hazel Jane and today we are going to be playing around with some new makeup. But more specifically, a new eyeshadow palette. I have tried a new foundation today and I have to say so far it's holding up pretty well. But we're going to be having a look and playing around with this. It is the Botanical palette from Beauty Bay. Now, from what I can remember, this was originally released as a limited edition palette, like however long ago, and based on the feedback that they got from people, they have now re-released this palette as part of their core collection. I mean, if you couldn't tell from the image and the name Botanical alone, the colour story on this, I am so excited to play around with this. The colours in it are
unbelievably pretty.
First of all, it's packaged very well. Not only was there like a dust cover with the promo images, there was also a box, and within that box, it was bubble wrapped as well. This is a big palette. So this is a 42 colour palette, which is an insane number of colours, to be honest. And whilst it's big, like for that number of colours, it's surprisingly compact. I've definitely had palettes with less colours that take up more room than this. So this palette is vegan and cruelty free and it is £25, which
For 42 colours?
let me do some maths real quick. That works out at just under 60p per shade. That's kind of crazy. And for the big reveal, this is my first time seeing this in real life, and I'm honestly kind of in love with a lot of these colours. Even these like more neutrally brown colours, a lot of them are quite cool toned. I am going to swatch all of these colours, but I'm going to do it row by row and I will just show you the results because swatching all 42 on camera, I think that would just be painful. But this is the very top row swatched. One thing I will say straight off the bat, the matte shades are insanely soft. Like they've got that proper buttery kind of texture to them. The shimmers as well are really pretty. They're really pigmented and not like flaky or chunky. Yeah, the matte shades didn't come out like chalky or anything like that. So, and I mean, those first two shades, those kind of like swampy, cool toned greens, we are off to a very, very promising start. Okay, I've realised swatching it on the side of my arm, you can see them slightly better. This is the second row. Same as the top row, all the matte shades are really, really soft. The shimmers are really, really nice. The one thing I did notice, this shade, not quite as pigmented as the others, but obviously is a very, very light kind of yellowy green shade. I know yellow in particular is a very, very weak pigment, so any shades or colours that have that as a kind of base, you're more likely to have a bit of a problem with them like in manufacturing them. But it's not like dry or chalky or anything like that, it's just not quite as pigmented as the other shades. What I'm noticing already though that I really like is the way this palette is laid out. I feel like each row feels like it's been curated, that you could quite easily do a very cohesive look with like all of the colours on that row. So it turns out I can't swatch eyeshadows on my arm like in an even line to save my life. But the third row is starting to move more into like the more earthy tones, like the browns, this like almost terracotta-y kind of colour. And there's a couple of more golden like coppery shimmers to it as well. This like pale green shimmer is unbelievably pretty. I can already tell I'm going to get such bad decision paralysis trying to work out which shades I want to use because I want to use all of them. So this is the fourth row all swatched. This top colour, I absolutely adore this one. This one is really pretty as well because even though it's a very coppery kind of orange colour in the pan, it actually has like a slightly pink reflex to it. I will say as well, the colour scheme for this row in particular, it is giving me like Shrek colour palette, but in the best way. Okay, so the fifth row has, I think, one of the prettiest shimmers I have ever seen, which is this insanely bright, kind of bluey, silvery colour. We move firmly away from the greens, and this end of the palette is a bit more of the kind of wearable, more natural kind of colours. Colours like this one and this one, which are quite pale, very, very soft. This one, I did notice, again, similar to that very first pale shade, it's not super pigmented, but it is kind of like a stone-esque colour, so I wasn't expecting a lot of pigment with it. It's still applied quite smoothly though, so again, it's not dry or chalky or anything like that. I absolutely adore the little like splash of like plum colour that's been included with this palette. It really ties in that like botanical theme, and obviously I just love purple anyway. But again, the colour story of this row, I feel like they would all work really well together. So this is the 6th and final row all swatched. I just wanted to take a second to draw attention to this shimmer shade smack bang in the middle, because so this particular shade, this is the shade Waterfall. It actually has like a special mention in the description for this palette on the website, because apparently this is one of their hero shades. It's a standout silver shimmer with lilac and gold flecks in it. And I mean, when I turn my arm, you can see the gold reflecting off the light, but you can really see that like bluey lilac colour. I do love a duochrome metallic-y moment, and honestly, it feels like magic. But again, the matte shades on this row are much more like neutral, natural friendly. They're not quite as bold as the other ones. But one thing I have noticed, amongst both the colours and the more neutral shades, there's a really good mix in terms of like the depth of colour. In it, I feel like someone such as myself with very, very fair skin would be able to utilise a lot of these shades. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of shades here that would work beautifully on deeper skin tones as well, which is something that coloured palettes especially can sometimes miss the mark with, in that they don't necessarily have the right kind of colours for every skin tone. So a palette like this I think would be really, really good for like a working MUA, because it's a very versatile palette that you could use on, I'd say, pretty much any skin tone, to be fair. I'm very excited to actually dive in and try and use these. I'm now just scared because I have to choose which ones I want to use. Based off the swatches and just first impressions, I have quite high hopes for this. The formula of all of these shades was incredibly consistent. There weren't any in particular that were like super different or a bit crap. As I said, some of the paler shades were not quite as pigmented, but that is to be expected because that's just the nature of those shades. But obviously swatching them is one thing, so we need to see how they actually go on the eyes. Okay, so I've primed my eyes with a little bit of concealer and then just added a very light layer of translucent powder over the top. I have like a vague idea of what I want to try and do. I'm going to start off by taking that very first shade, which is called Hemp. I'm just taking it on a super fluffy brush. I'm going to start at the outer corner and just very, very gently buff out in circles from there. I want this to end up being quite a sheer sort of wash of colour, so I'm applying like little to no pressure. Starting from the centre point where I applied it, I'm just buffing it out in circles and just gradually making the circle bigger and bigger, but the further out I get, the less pressure I use. It just helps to create a really nice, even, very soft blend. I'm just bringing it along the crease slightly. I've gone back in with a tiny bit more product, but again, I'm focusing most of the blending on this sort of outer corner and basically just sort of buffing the excess over the crease. Because I draw my eyebrows on quite a lot higher than they should be, I end up with a lot of like excess lid space to play with. So if you don't have as much room, you can always use a smaller or like a less fluffy brush. You'll get a bit more control over it and it won't blow it out as much. But I give myself a lot more room to work with, and I generally prefer a very blown out look on myself. So that's why I tend to use quite big brushes for that. If you're struggling at all to get the edges blended as well, you can just take a clean brush and again, buff out those edges. It will help to soften it out without moving the colour around, but I'm quite happy with that blend, so I'm not going to bother doing that. I'm then going to take like a slightly thinner, longer blending brush, and I'm then going to go in with the second shade of the palette, which is Herb. I'm again going to start at that outer corner and very carefully buff it along the crease. I'm not too worried about it getting on the lid because I'm going to be bringing it all over the lid. What I'm trying to focus on mainly at the minute is getting it blended like upwards into that original shade. I will say as well, those two colours have blended together so nicely. I have that original brush with the first shade on hand as always, again, just to help go back and forth between the colours to blend them together a bit more. I also have a clean brush on hand, again, just to help with conjoining them all together. I picked up a little bit too much of this colour on this side, so I'm going to go back in with that original shade to soften it out a little bit. I'm going back in with a little bit more on the outer corner just to give a bit more depth to it and add a bit more pigment. I'm not going to buff it out too much though, because again, I want to keep that like concentration of colour just in that outer corner. I'm going to take this small like packing brush. I'm going to use the shade Ivy to put all over the lid. Okay, for a green shade, that is quite an insane amount of pigment. I'm very impressed with that. We're focusing on the center of the lid and then kind of slowly bringing it up towards the crease. I'm using this brush to basically, as the brush is named, pack the color on. If you're using a darker shade with this kind of brush, with this kind of motion, I definitely recommend tapping off the excess shadow before you apply it. It will just help prevent any fallout on the lower half of your face. The other option, of course, is you can put a very light layer of loose powder under your eye. That way any fallout will get caught by that powder and you can just sweep it away when you're done. Many times I have ruined my makeup by just going ham with really dark shadows and then it all drops down around like my lip and my nose. Same as before with the other shades, I'm going back and forth between the brushes and the shadows to get a nice consistent blend between all of them. Though to be fair, those colours actually blended together so nicely that I almost didn't need to go back in. I'm going to take a really small brush for the lower lash line. This is like a similar shape to the packing brush, but just tiny. But I'm going to use that second shade, Herb, to go along the lower lash line. I started out by just sort of like stamping and wiggling it a little bit and then very gently sweeping it along. I'm just going to go in with an eyeliner on like the waterline, but I'm going to use a brown instead of a black. Browns around the eyes are just generally a bit softer and I think it will tie in quite nicely with the more greeny botanical vibes of the palette. Because there are no like black shades in the palette, I think it will just work a little bit better. It just helps to add a bit more depth to that lower lash line, especially without being like too harsh. You could probably leave this look here, just maybe add like a highlight in the inner corner or just a nice layer of mascara and you'd be good to go. But I need to try out some of these shimmers and overall I just feel like being a bit more dramatic. I'm just taking one of my like super fine liner brushes and I've gone back into the shade Ivy because I want to try and create some like organic line work, I guess. Now this is where it could go horribly wrong, so I'm keeping my hold on the brush like almost at the very end of the brush so that it's quite loose in my hand. If ever I'm trying to do more like natural organic lines or anything that needs a kind of randomness to it, this is probably the best grip because the brush can then kind of like move on its own. Using the shade Moth, I'm going to go in with the same brush to try and deepen up some areas of this line work. By using a brown that has a sort of similar undertones to the green shades, it creates a much richer colour rather than like just trying to use black. So the lines are looking a bit like veiny at the moment, which is actually kind of what I wanted. The image that I have in my head is like the veins and the texture patterns that you get on like the underside of leaves, crossed in with a little bit of like almost a watercolor element maybe? I mean, I say that now, it might not turn out that way, so we'll just see how it goes. I'm then going to go in with this really small angled brush to start adding some shadow in between the lines. So I've just gone back in with the shade Ivy, which is that shade that's over the lid. The reason I've decided to use an angled brush is so that I can basically follow the line and just drag the colour down slightly, so I still have that nice clean edge. The good thing about doing more like organic detailing as opposed to like a wing liner is that you do not have to worry about symmetry in the slightest. I want to add some slightly brighter tones to the line work, so I'm going to go in with the shade Evergreen. Again, just using that same method of kind of stamping and dragging it away from the lines. I'm going to use Matcha, which is that like super pale yellowy kind of tone, just to soften out some of the colours and give a bit more like depth in terms of the shades. I also wanted to try it a little bit because it was the slightly weaker shade when I swatched it, so I want to see how it actually looks on the eye. You can see where I've added it along here and then used it up here to sort of blend this colour out. Whilst it isn't the most pigmented of the colours, it is still there and it blends really nicely with these deeper shades, so you can get like a really nice gradient with it. So shades like that I think would be really good for sort of blending out the other shades and softening them up a little bit. And again, it just adds a bit more of like a gradient, so it's not just one flat colour. There's a few areas where I've like over blended it a bit and I've lost some of the sharpness of that line, so I'm going to go back in with that deep brown shade Moth on the super fine little liner brush and just add a bit more depth. You could obviously use any kind of like liner, water activated or liquid liner if you wanted to get it like really sharp, but I still want to keep it a bit on the softer side. I have to try their like Hero Hue, that waterfall shade, but I also want to take a little bit of that really bright silvery colour, which is Lightning. I don't know how well this is going to work, but I'm going to try and take it on this like even smaller detail brush. I want to see if it works with the shimmer just on its own. Obviously shimmers are not really designed to be applied like this, so if it doesn't work too well, I can always use a bit of water or setting spray to turn it into almost like a liquid formula. Okay, it's kind of working. I don't know how well the camera's picking it up. I wanted to use that shade just to give a little like highlight moment over some of the lines, add like a little bit of glitter to it basically. I'm not gonna lie though, I think I might just stick a load of it in the inner corner. Okay, that waterfall shade is really cool because where it hits the light from certain angles over the green, you almost kind of can't see it. But then you turn and then you get the actual reflex of like the gold. I do still want to add a little bit of lightning like right in the inner core though. I know excessive inner corner highlight isn't really a thing anymore, but I refuse to let it go. Oh, it's so pretty. Okay, I've just gone in and added that lightning shade over some of the line work where I've added the other shade as well. And where it's just that bit brighter, it's given the effect that I wanted it to, where it's just highlighted some of these like shapes that I have going on. Okay, I don't want to add too much more to this because I'm going to end up going overboard. But let me go add some mascara, a lip, just generally finish up, and then we can come back to see how it all sits together. But I have to say, so far with this palette, I'm a little bit in love. I have a tendency to overdo it on the lips, so I wanted to keep the lips a bit more subtle so that the focus remained on the eyes, especially where I decided to add an excessive amount of lashes on my lower lash. But honestly, I think it works really well. I think it's really cute. But here we have the finished look. Obviously, I know this is not going to be to everyone's taste, but I wanted to try and utilise the palette and sort of showcase some of the colours and the shimmers in a way that wasn't just like a smoky eye or a subtle look kind of thing. To be fair, this is the kind of look that I would wear just as an everyday kind of thing anyway, but it's a really fun way if you want to have a little bit of a play around with colours and shades and shapes, because obviously you can tailor it to like fit your eye shape and your face shape because it is these kind of like random lines. But I'm really happy with how this look turned out. The palette, before you even look at the price of the palette in comparison to like how many shades you're getting and the quality, I can fully understand why people were like demanding that they bring this back. It is such a beautiful palette. The colour story in it is absolutely gorgeous. There's such a nice range, and similar to ones that I've looked at before, it's got a really good balance of more neutral, natural, everyday shades and then you have these brighter colours, these shimmers. But because it is this like botanical kind of earthy theme to it, the colours that are in it aren't like super bright or neon or anything like that. So I feel like this is a really, really good palette if you want to sort of start experimenting with a little bit of colour or just something a bit different, because there's no like neon shades or insanely bright shades to be intimidated by. They're all still very natural colours. The colours blended together really, really nicely. They applied really well. I didn't really have any problems with them. I struggled a little bit with the shimmer on the brush, but that was because I was utilising it in maybe the wrong way. Overall, I am very happy with this look. I'm very happy with this palette. I will definitely be reaching for this on probably quite a regular basis. I don't think I have any other palettes that have those kind of green tones in them, especially those like swampy greens. They're so nice. Let me know if you've tried this palette and what you think of it, or any other Beauty Bay palettes. If there's any other products you want me to look at or makeup looks that you want me to do, let me know in the comments down below. I'm really enjoying these kinds of videos at the moment, so I definitely want to do more of them. If you do want to see more of them as well, feel free to hit subscribe. If you're already subscribed, feel free to hit like. Don't forget to follow me on my other social media channels, Instagram, TikTok, Spotify. But other than that, I hope you all have a fabulous day. I love and appreciate all of you so, so much. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.